The Truss premiership is dead. Long live the Truss premiership. Just kidding. In a surprise to no one, Liz Truss has resigned, or at least announced her intention to resign as the Prime Minister of Great Britain. She will become the shortest-lived Prime Minister in British history. I didn't look up who is in second place. I figured when I saw... honestly, I'm shocked that she made it a whole month. She made it a month and a half. And by the way, if I sound a little strange, forgive me. I was deathly ill yesterday. I'm still pretty sick today, but I've got a cough drop in my mouth, and that should be able to get me by for about 10 minutes. And I can't miss another day after what's just transpired. You see, for those of us who are over here in the United States, you probably have never even heard of Liz Truss. You certainly wouldn't have heard of Liz Truss before she became Prime Minister. Unfortunately, I had the displeasure of knowing who Liz Truss was a few months ago, because she had been angling for the job of Prime Minister since the start of the Ukraine war. She positioned herself as a Ukraine hawk, and so when Boris's foreign policy, ironically, on the Ukraine war led to his own demise, for some reason, the natural choice of the British establishment for replacing him was Liz Truss, who, if anything, was worse than Boris. Liz Truss's bright idea, when she took residence at 10 Downing Street, was to double down on everything Boris had done and just do it harder. We just need to be more anti-Russia and have less energy for the people of Great Britain. We need more sanctions on Russia and potentially Iran or other countries, which effectively are sanctions on British consumers. This will lead to energy costs necessarily skyrocketing, which has happened under Boris Johnson and continued under Liz Truss. Additionally, Ms. Truss was given a good kick in the rear by the Bank of England, which created a market panic by telling pension funds that they had 3 days left to get out of the market, which is pretty remarkable. We've never heard of, at least in my lifetime, I've never heard a central bank tell investors, sell all your assets while you still can. And so that created a tremendous amount of financial chaos, which only added to her problems. But frankly, I don't think that the financial machinations would have been enough to take her down. She brought about her own demise by making the lives of her citizens, or subjects, or I guess she is a subject technically, isn't that what they call them over there? So her fellow subjects, she made their lives worse, materially worse. And as long as she was in charge, there was no hope that things were going to get better. But sadly, just like when they got rid of Boris, I was certain that they weren't going to replace him with anyone who would make things better. Now that they've gotten rid of Truss, almost certainly they will replace her with someone who will not make things any better. You see, there is no real opposition party in the United Kingdom to the sanctions regime, which has caused this cost of living crisis. There is no party of cheap and affordable energy. It simply doesn't exist. And even though I guess I can give Liz Truss some applause for trying to expand oil exploration domestically in Great Britain and offshore. You know, that is a valiant effort. That is not a short-term solution. That does nothing to help people, within the next year or 5 years even. And that's assuming that once, they legalized and liberalized laws regarding oil exploration, that the Great Reset aligned financial institutions would even lend to people who wish to engage in oil exploration. Additionally, Liz Truss wanted to engage in more MMT at a time when inflation is already off the charts. She wanted to cut taxes and increase government spending. Now, I'm sure that her successor will do the same thing. Maybe they won't cut taxes. Maybe they'll just increase government spending. But the net effect is the same. They will be printing money and pumping it into the British economy, which will just make everyone poorer. save for perhaps the few people who are right there at the mouth of the spigot when the money hose is turned on. But those of us who are downstream, who aren't politically connected, who aren't government contractors, you're going to get the short end of the stick. You're going to get all the inflation and none of the welfare. And so I don't know what what the United Kingdom is going to do. Even if there's an election and the Tories are thrown out in favor of the Labour Party, the disgraced Labour Party, and Keir Starmer, nothing will change fundamentally. On the big issues, Keir Starmer is right in line with Liz Truss and Boris Johnson as far as I see it. Doesn't matter whether he likes fracking or not, because in the short term, none of that matters. What matters is, are we going to import more, and by we, I mean the British, I'm obviously not British, but from their perspective, are we going to import more fuel from overseas or not? As I've explained numerous times in the past, American LNG is not the answer. First of all, as an American, I don't want the Europors siphoning off our gas supply, which here in the state of Florida accounts for, I believe, 75% of our electricity generation. Electricity is already very expensive here compared to the rest of America, and I don't want to see prices go up anymore. And so I have no interest in helping the Europors, whether they be British, French, Germans, or otherwise, with a problem that they themselves created. There is perfectly affordable gas available via pipelines from Russia. You see, pipelines are a very efficient mode of transportation. Ships are not. Imagine loading up these big tanker ships and sailing them across the ocean when you could just pump that gas into a pipe and, voila, it shows up in your home. And so even if magically there was enough American LNG to supply the entirety of Western Europe, it would still be more expensive than the gas that they're used to, and not to mention the oil. We here in America, I believe, do not have heavy crude. We don't produce it. And diesel fuel then is not accessible. And it's not like you have old-timey diesel trucks that can run on crude oil. These modern diesel engines, all hopped up on emissions control and computers and whatnot, they require a very specific blend of fuel, and they have rather, excuse me, I hate coughing on video, excuse me, they have rather tight tolerances. If you use fuel that is not up to spec in these modern diesel engines, you will destroy them, or at least, destroy the fuel system. And so Russia just happens to be a major exporter of heavy crude, and that is where, historically, the Europeans have gotten it. And so I have no sympathy for these people. They have created a crisis entirely by choice. This crisis didn't need to exist. They managed to do business on energy with the Russians all throughout the Cold War. Because back then there were adults in the room who understood that the Soviets and the West, NATO, had, some mutual economic interests. I mean, think about it. If it was really as simple as just buying American oil and gas instead of Russian oil and gas, wouldn't the Europeans have done that during the Cold War, all throughout the Cold War, especially back when big oil was much bigger here in the United States, back when, ExxonMobil was the largest company by market cap on the planet, back when, in the era of, J.R. Ewing and the Texas oil man? No, even back then, the Europeans were, so-called dependent on Russian energy. And so these children who run governments such as the one in Westminster or in Berlin have selfishly put their petty political differences before the interests of their citizens. And you know what? I mean, I try to defend the people to a certain extent, but At what point is there going to be any sort of popular outcry for cheap energy? They are the ones who are suffering. They cry when their businesses are destroyed because they get a 24,000 pound electric bill. Are the people of Europe and Great Britain just ignorant? Are they so ideologically committed to the cause of Ukraine, a country that 90% of them would not have been able to identify on a map, a year and a half ago? Really, it's hard to say, but I would have to imagine that whoever replaces Liz Truss, even if it is Keir Starmer, as I said earlier, eventually, member of a completely different party, you're not going to see a major shift in British policy. Things are going to continue to get worse for the citizenry there, and the next prime minister will meet the same fate as Liz Truss. So with that said, I will hopefully see you folks back here tomorrow, assuming that I'm not sicker